I'm Bo Crawford from Alabama, and this is my college football rant. It's mid-October. The College Football Playoff Committee hasn't even released their first rankings yet, and already we can tell that the whole thing is going to be totally screwed up. This is my surprised face. I'm not disappointed in what I've seen from the committee thus far. It's been about what you'd expect when a bunch of academics organize professional teams. It's the media that I'm disappointed in. They have a golden opportunity to shape how college football works from here on out, and they are dropping the ball. Take today, for example. There's a group of journalists. Jeff Long is walking a group of journalists through a mock selection process where they pretend they're the committee members based on the 2008 season and choose the 4 teams that go to the playoffs. And at the end of the day, we're going to hear a lot of talk about strength of schedule. Who was hurt? Who was suspended? Were there any mitigating circumstances with certain games? Do they judge on resume or who is actually the best team? And worst of all, you'll hear whether that conference championship should matter and whether they should be used as the, quote, tiebreakers. These same journalists are also going to say that they wish they had guidance. They want more guidance from Jeff Long on these things. The irony is that these journalists are supposed to be the foremost experts in the country, and they have a golden opportunity to show Jeff Long and the other committee members how it should work. But instead, they're complaining as the foremost experts about needing more guidance. If you're one of the foremost experts in college football so that you've been invited to this thing, why are you looking to Jeff Long for more guidance? You should have an opinion. Bring your opinion. You have a chance to make this thing not dysfunctional like the BCS was, and you're repeating past mistakes. Bring an opinion and stick by it. What are you doing in the business if you don't have an opinion on how this thing should work? Allow me to demonstrate using our in-studio state-of-the-art technology. This is a screenshot of the brackets at the end of the week that virtually every journalist puts out. This happens to be Brad Edwards, who I think is one of the best journalists in business. But anyway, he lists Mississippi State 1, Ole Miss 2, Florida State 3, Notre Dame 4, Baylor and TCU outside looking in. The problem with this is it presumes that the sequential rankings are the same as who is going to make it to the playoff. So I do not like listing who you think the best 4 teams are as being synonymous with who's going to the playoff. Now, if I was on the committee or if I was a journalist who was lucky enough to be invited to this committee, to this mock selection, I would make it clear going in that my default selections would be the SEC champion, the Pac-12 champion, the ACC champion, and the Big Ten champion. Outside looking in would be the Big 12 and Notre Dame. So I know that these committee members, they're watching all these film and they're doing all this studying, but basically the way it breaks down is there are 4 playoff spots and there are more than 4 conferences. So you have to narrow down those conference champions to only pick 4. I mean, that's the only fair way to do it. And why would I default to of the Big 5, why would I default to these 4? Because the Big 12 has 10 members and they do not have a conference championship, and that is important. Playing Playing on a neutral field for all the marbles is a big deal. And, if they don't agree with that, they do agree with that, or else they wouldn't be pounding their chest over the Sugar Bowl last year. So obviously they think it's important. So Texas should, if Texas wants to take the Big Ten spot, because the Big Ten is a weak conference, if the Big 12 wants to take the Big Ten spot, then Texas is going to have to share some more of its money. Right now they have 10 members. They're closer to what we would call, or as close to what we would call a division as they are an actual conference. They need to step up, get another couple of members, and put on their big boy panties and play a conference championship like these other 4 conferences do. As far as Notre Dame, this is why the committee exists, so they can take into account the fact that college football isn't clean like the NFL, and they can take into account unique situations. And first of all, Notre Dame should join a conference, not some hybrid version of joining a conference, and that hurts their chances of making it in the playoffs since they're not in a conference. But it's not out of the question, and that's one of the things the committee should discuss. I'm just saying that these 4 would be my default, and I would only deviate from that under special circumstances. I'm sorry to deliver this news, Big 12. I'm sure it was hard to hear, but just so there's no misunderstanding, running that commercial 1,000 times during one football game where all your teams play all the other teams isn't going to change my mind. Sorry, Big 12, Jedi mind trick, not going to work. Now, some folks in the SEC may not like this because they like the idea of 2 teams making a playoff. But remember that Alabama playing LSU and Alabama not winning the division, much less the conference, and then winning the national championship offended people's sensibilities so much that it finally was the death of the BCS, finally. So, and so, for example, in this situation, going back to Brad Edwards' top 4, let's just assume, for example, it could be any team, but for this year we'll use these current rankings. Let's assume Mississippi State plays Georgia in the SEC championship. Then Ole Miss, having beaten Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl. So for Ole Miss losing the Egg Bowl and losing the division and not going to the conference championship, they would be rewarded with a bye. That makes no sense. So conference championships need to mean something. They need to be essentially the quarterfinal leading into the semifinal, and describing them as a tiebreaker is leading us down repeating the mistakes of the BCS. And I'm very disappointed to see these journalists who should be leading the charge towards something that's sensible and makes sense in the NFL and makes sense in high school football and virtually every other sport. And instead, they want to debate, who's peaking at the end of the season and look at a bunch of game film. You don't need to look at game film for this. Take the best 4 conference champions, let them play. And on a final note, I want to say to the SEC fans who are greedy and they want to see 2 teams in the championship, that is a slippery slope, because I promise you there will be a year when the SEC champion, the only SEC team that has a chance of making it, is heading into the SEC championship with everything to lose and nothing to gain. And they'll be 1 loss away from knocking themselves out of the 14 playoff. If we're going to do this academic, no criteria, try to find the 4 best teams based on a constantly moving target that makes no sense whatsoever. I hope somebody, be it a committee member or a journalist, has the guts to say, this is my process, this is how I'm going to vote. Now, whether you agree with it or not, I want some, for like in my example, whether you agree with it or not, I hope you respect the fact that there is a logical process I went through and I can back up why I believe what I believe, as opposed to saying I'm watching a bunch of game film or I want more guidance. Somebody stand up and take leadership of this thing. Let's not forget that the argument against the playoff for so long was that it detracted from regular season games. Well, if you want to detract from regular season games, make it so the Egg Bowl or the Iron Bowl don't matter, and you get to play for the national championship anyway. You don't have to win the division. You don't have to go to the conference championship. That's a good way to detract from regular season games. So somebody needs to stand up and say this. And if you're embarrassed to say it, then you shouldn't be on a committee. I mean, when you signed up for that committee, you signed up to possibly live the rest of your years on a desert island. I mean, it's going to be controversial no matter what you do. As for me, I'd say what my philosophy is on the front end. Then I won't be criticized for not following that process at the end when somebody's left out. Bo, signing off.